I buried my husband in a country where I knew almost no one. 12 hours later, I asked my family for a ride home. Their replies were cruel. Screenshots are being read on television.
I buried my husband in a country where I knew almost no one. 12 hours later, I asked my family for one small favor, a ride home from the airport. Their replies were so cruel that, before midnight, screenshots of them were being read on television. Hello. My name is Amelia Carter. I am 43 years old, and this is the story of the night my family abandoned me at my lowest point and accidentally exposed a secret they had been hiding for years. My husband, Daniel, died in Lisbon, Portugal, on a wet Tuesday morning in October. We had traveled there for what was supposed to be our 20th anniversary vacation. Daniel had always wanted to see the old yellow trams climbing the hills and hear music drifting from the small restaurants near the river. On our fourth day, he collapsed beside me in the hotel lobby. One moment, he was joking about the terrible coffee. The next, he was on the marble floor, unable to breathe. The doctors later called it a massive cardiac event. They said there had been almost no warning and nothing I could have done. Those words did not comfort me. For 6 days, I moved through paperwork, embassy calls, hospital corridors, and funeral arrangements as if I were underwater. Daniel had once told me that if anything happened while we were traveling, he wanted to be cremated before coming home. I followed his wishes. I stood in a small chapel with rain tapping against the windows and held the wooden box that contained the man who had shared half my life. My family knew every detail. My mother, Patricia, called once on the first day. My younger sister, Vanessa, sent 3 crying face emojis. My brother wrote, "That's rough. Let us know when you get back." I told myself people handled grief differently. By the time my flight landed at Philadelphia International Airport, I had been awake for nearly 20 hours. My suitcase had been delayed. My phone battery was at 9%. Daniel's ashes rested inside a padded black case beneath my coat. I opened our family group chat and typed, "My flight landed early. I'm at Terminal A. Could someone please pick me up? I don't think I can manage the train tonight." My mother answered first. "Amelia, you should have arranged transportation before leaving. We all have lives." Then Vanessa replied, "I'm hosting book club. I can't cancel because you failed to plan." Kyle added, "Take an Uber. You inherited Daniel's money, didn't you?" I stared at the screen until the words blurred. I wrote, "My wallet was stolen at the hotel. My replacement card is not working yet. I have $40 in cash, and the ride costs more than $100, please. I have Daniel with me." Vanessa replied with a laughing emoji. "Daniel is dead, Amelia. Stop making everything dramatic." Then my mother wrote the sentence I would remember for the rest of my life. "Your husband was always your problem. His death does not make him ours." For a few seconds, the entire airport seemed to go silent. People moved around me, pulling luggage and greeting loved ones. A little boy ran into his father's arms. An elderly woman pressed both hands to her daughter's cheeks. Everyone seemed to belong to someone. I belonged to no one. My phone slipped from my hand and struck the floor. A woman in a navy blue airport uniform picked it up before I could bend down. Her badge said Ilan on our eyes, Passenger Services, Mayam. "Are you all right?" she asked. I tried to say yes, but no sound came out. She looked at the black case in my arms, then at the group chat still glowing on my screen. I saw her read only 2 lines before her expression changed. "Come with me," she said gently. "You shouldn't be alone right now." Elena took me to a quiet staff room, found tea, and connected my phone to a charger. She did not ask questions until I was ready. When I finally explained, she offered to pay for a taxi herself. I refused. I had spent my whole life refusing help from strangers while giving everything to family. That was my first mistake. Then Elena noticed the name on my boarding pass. "Amelia Carter," she asked. "Daniel Carter's wife." I nodded. Her face went pale. "The Daniel Carter from Harbor Light Systems." I had heard the company name before, but Daniel rarely spoke about work at home. He was a cybersecurity consultant. That was how he described it, anyway. "Yes," I said slowly. "Why?" Elena closed the staff room door. "Because my brother works there," she whispered. "And this morning, everyone received an emergency notice saying Daniel Carter had died while investigating the largest charity fraud case in the company's history." I stopped breathing. Daniel had never mentioned an investigation. Elena continued carefully. "The notice said his evidence was missing." At that exact moment, my phone began to ring. The caller identification showed my brother's name. Kyle. The same brother who had just told me to take an Uber. I answered. He did not apologize. He asked, "What exactly did Daniel bring home with you?" There are questions that reveal more than answers ever could. Kyle did not ask whether I was safe. He did not ask how the funeral had gone. He asked what Daniel had brought home. I looked at Alina and placed the call on speaker. "I don't understand," I said. "His laptop." Kyle replied too quickly. "Files. drives, anything from his office. Mom says you're carrying a black case. My eyes moved to the case beneath my coat. This contains Daniel's ashes. Silence. Then Kyle exhaled. Fine. Where is his backpack? I remembered something I had almost forgotten. At the Lisbon hospital, a hotel employee had brought me Daniel's belongings: his watch, wallet, wedding ring, phone, and gray travel backpack. I had not opened the backpack. I had checked it with my missing suitcase because carrying it had felt impossible. The airline lost it, I said. Kyle swore. Listen to me, Amelia. Do not talk to anyone from Harbor Light. Come to Mom's house. We'll help you sort this out. 20 minutes earlier, my grief had been an inconvenience. Now the whole family wanted me home. Book club ended early, I asked. He hung up. Elena and I stared at each other. Your brother works for Harbor Light, she asked. No, he runs a small accounting firm. At least, that was what I believed. Elena called airport security. Within minutes, Officer Marcus Bell arrived. I showed him the messages and explained Daniel's death, the missing luggage, and Kyle's strange call. Marcus wrote everything down. Then he asked whether I had received any unusual instructions from Daniel before he died. I almost said no. But a memory returned. The night before Daniel collapsed, he had placed our hotel key card on the table and said, if something happens to me, do not trust anyone who suddenly becomes helpful. I had laughed and asked whether he was auditioning for a spy movie. He had not laughed back. Instead, he said, your anniversary date opens what matters. I told Marcus. Before he could respond, the airline called. My suitcase had been located and was being transferred to baggage services. The gray backpack was attached to it. Marcus arranged for both bags to be delivered to a secure airport office. We found no laptop inside the backpack, no flash drive, no folder marked secret evidence. There were 2 shirts, a charger, a paperback novel, and Daniel's old leather toiletry bag. Then Elena opened the paperback. A brass luggage key fell between the pages. Its tag read 3/18. Airport security confirmed that it belonged to a storage locker in Terminal C. Inside locker 318, we found a weathered green suitcase that I had never seen before. Marcus photographed it before opening it. Inside were copies of bank transfers, charity records, internal Harbor Light emails, and 3 encrypted storage drives. On top lay an envelope addressed to me in Daniel's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Amelia, if you are reading this, I did not get the chance to explain. For 2 years, I have been tracing money stolen from the Harbor Light Children's Relief Fund. The theft was hidden through consulting invoices and shell companies. I discovered that one of those companies belongs to Kyle. I also found payments to Vanessa and your mother. I wanted to be wrong. I was not. Do not confront them. Contact Mara Ellison at the Philadelphia Ledger. She has copies of the first half of the investigation. These drives contain the rest. The password is the date I promised you forever. I love you. Whatever happens next, remember kindness is not weakness, and family is not a license to steal. Daniel. I read the letter twice. Then a third time. My knees gave way, and Elena caught my arm. The Harbor Light Children's Relief Fund paid for medical treatment, temporary housing, and travel assistance for families with seriously ill children. I had attended its annual gala with Daniel. My mother had praised the charity at church. Vanessa had posted photographs from its fundraisers. Kyle had once bragged that his firm donated free accounting services. They had not been helping the charity. They had been draining it. Marcus contacted federal investigators. Because the documents could be evidence in a financial crime. He secured the suitcase and asked me not to leave the airport. While we waited, the family group chat exploded. Mom, your brother says you're confused. Tell us where you are. Vanessa. We're worried about your mental state. Kyle. Do not give Daniel's property to strangers. It legally belongs to the family. I stared at the phrase, the family. For years, those 2 words had controlled me. When Vanessa needed tuition, family helped. When Kyle's business struggled, family invested. When Mom wanted a new roof, family sacrificed. But when my husband died, family had book club. I took screenshots of every message. Then I called Mara Ellison. She answered on the second ring. When I gave her my name, she became silent. Mrs. Carter. She said, I've been waiting for this call for 3 months. Mara arrived at the airport with her editor and a lawyer. She showed me her correspondence with Daniel. He had documented more than $4 million, diverted from sick children through contracts approved by a Harbor Light executive named Russell Crane. Russell was not a stranger. He was Vanessa's fiancé. Their wedding was scheduled for the following Saturday. Then Mara showed me a photograph from a private charity dinner 6 months earlier. At the center sat Russell, Kyle, Vanessa, and my mother. On the table between them was a contract bearing Daniel's forged signature. By 9 that evening, 2 federal agents had interviewed me. They believed Daniel's death was natural, but the timing of his collapse and the pressure surrounding his investigation required a full review. They asked me to preserve every message and avoid warning my family about the evidence. That became difficult when my mother appeared at the airport with Kyle and Vanessa. They had not come when I was stranded and grieving. They came when they feared I had the truth. I saw them through the glass doors of the security office. Mom wore her church coat. Vanessa was still dressed for book club, if book club required diamonds and high heels. Kyle paced with his phone pressed to his ear. When an officer allowed them into the outer waiting area, my mother began to cry loudly. "My daughter is having a breakdown," she announced. "Her husband just died. She cannot make legal decisions." Vanessa added, "She has always been emotionally unstable." I had never been treated for any mental illness. They were building a story in real time: grieving widow, confused mind, unreliable witness. Kyle demanded my phone and Daniel's belongings. When Marcus refused, Kyle threatened to call the police commissioner. Marcus pointed at his badge and said, "You already called the police." For one brief second, I almost laughed. Then Russell Crane arrived with a Harbor Light attorney. Russell was tall, polished, and calm. He did not look like a man accused of stealing from sick children. He looked like someone who had spent his life learning that an expensive suit could make dishonesty appear respectable. He told officers that all of Daniel's work materials belonged to Harbor Light and must be returned immediately. Mara's lawyer replied that evidence of a suspected federal crime belonged exactly where federal agents decided it belonged. Russell's calm expression cracked. Vanessa grabbed my hand. "Amelia, please. You don't understand what Daniel was doing. He was obsessed. He wanted to ruin us. Why would he want to ruin you?" I asked. She had no safe answer. My mother stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Give Kyle the drives. We can still protect you." "From what?" Her eyes flicked toward the agents. That was when Mara received a call from her editor. Another news organization had learned that federal authorities were at the airport investigating Harbor Light. If the Ledger did not publish immediately, the family could control the first version of the story. Mara asked my permission to quote the group messages. I looked at my mother, my brother, and my sister. They had spent years using privacy as a curtain. Behind it, they had manipulated me, mocked Daniel, and stolen money intended for desperate families. Now they wanted that same curtain to protect them. "Use every word," I said. At 10:17 p.m., the Philadelphia Ledger published its headline. Below it were the screenshots. "You inherited Daniel's money, didn't you? Daniel is dead. Stop making everything dramatic. His death does not make him ours." A story spread within minutes. A television crew arrived outside the terminal. Then another. Harbor Light announced that Russell had been suspended. Donors demanded an independent audit. Families who had been denied assistance began contacting reporters. My mother's phone rang without stopping. Vanessa screamed that I had destroyed her wedding. Kyle said I had misunderstood a few administrative transfers. Russell said nothing. He simply walked away while cameras followed him. But the greatest shock came at 11:03 p.m. One of the federal agents returned with preliminary information from the drives. The encrypted files included recorded conversations. Daniel had secretly attended 2 meetings wearing an audio recorder. In one recording, Kyle explained how to divide invoices below reporting limits. In another, Russell approved payments to Vanessa's design company for events that never happened. Then my mother's voice entered the recording. "Amelia must never know," she said. "She always chooses Daniel. If he tells her, she'll turn against her own blood." Russell answered. "Then make sure she thinks he is hiding money from her." Grief makes people easy to confuse. My skin turned cold. They had prepared for Daniel's death before he died. The agents quickly clarified that the recording did not prove they caused it. The conversation referred to what might happen if his heart condition worsened. That was another secret Daniel had kept from me. He had recently been diagnosed with a dangerous rhythm disorder. He had hidden it because he wanted one last normal trip with me. The truth broke my heart in 2 directions. I was angry that he had not told me. I also understood why. Every hour of our anniversary had been bright because neither of us knew it was goodbye. The agents asked my family to remain available for formal questioning. My mother finally stopped pretending to cry. She looked directly at me and said, "After everything I gave you, this is how you repay me." For the first time in my life, I did not defend myself. "You gave me a childhood," I said. "Daniel gave those children a chance to live. You stole from both of us." The investigation lasted 11 months. During that time, I learned that revenge in real life rarely arrives like thunder. It arrives as subpoenas, audits, frozen accounts, canceled contracts, and doors that no longer open for people who once believed they owned every room. Russell Crane pleaded guilty to wire fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction. He received 9 years in federal prison. Kyle admitted creating shell companies and false invoices. He received 5 years and lost his accounting license permanently. Vanessa claims believed the payments to her company were legitimate. The evidence showed otherwise. She avoided prison by cooperating, but she was ordered to repay hundreds of thousands of dollars and serve 3 years of supervised release. My mother was not charged with organizing the scheme, but she pleaded guilty to making false statements to investigators and hiding financial records. She received home confinement, probation, and a reputation she could no longer polish with church clothes and charity photographs. Vanessa's wedding never happened. Kyle's firm closed. My mother sold the house to pay legal fees and restitution. People sometimes ask whether I enjoyed watching them fall. The honest answer is complicated. I did not celebrate their fear. I did not feel joy when the verdicts were read. But I felt relief when the truth became too large for them to bury. Justice did not bring Daniel back, yet it stopped his work from dying with him. Harborlight recovered most of the stolen funds through insurance, seized assets, and civil settlements. The charity created the Daniel Carter Emergency Travel Grant for parents who needed to reach children receiving treatment far from home. The first year, it helped 86 families. I became one of its volunteer directors. Elena Ruse attended the dedication ceremony. Her brother came too. So did Officer Marcus Bell and Mara Ellison. They were strangers on the worst night of my life, yet each of them showed me more loyalty than the people who shared my last name. After the ceremony, Mara asked what happened when I finally left the airport that night. I had never told her. At 1:30 in the morning, after the interviews were complete, Elena walked me to the curb. A line of Black Muse vans waited outside, but I did not leave with a reporter. Dozens of ordinary people had seen the story and come to the airport. Some held flowers. Some held signs for Daniel. One woman had driven 40 miles, because her son's cancer treatment had once been funded by Harborlight. An older man named Thomas Green stood beside a clean blue sedan. His wife had died the previous year, and he said he understood what the first ride home felt like. "I can take you?" he offered. No cameras, no questions. Elena checked his identification and photographed his license plate. Then she hugged me. I sat in the back seat with Daniel's ashes in my lap. Thomas drove quietly through the sleeping city. When we reached my house, he carried my suitcase to the porch, but refused the money I offered. "Before leaving," he said, "tonight, a lot of people learned what your family is. Do not forget that a lot of people also learned who your husband was." Inside, the house felt enormous. Daniel's shoes were still beside the door. His coffee mug rested upside down on the drying mat. A grocery list in his handwriting was attached to the refrigerator. For the first time since Lisbon, I allowed myself to collapse. I sat on the kitchen floor and cried until sunrise. Grief did not end when justice arrived. It changed shape. Some mornings, it was a quiet ache. Other days, it was anger. Sometimes I still reached across the bed before remembering there was no one there. But Daniel had left me more than evidence. He left me the courage to stop confusing obligation with love. Months later, my mother mailed me a letter. She wrote that the family had made mistakes and asked me to visit. She did not name the children whose money she helped conceal. She did not mention abandoning me at the airport. She simply said that people should forgive their mothers. I returned the letter unopened. Vanessa sent apologies after Russell's sentencing. Every apology ended with a request for money, for a statement to the judge, for help finding work. I answered none of them. Kyle wrote once from prison. His letter was different. He admitted he had hated Daniel because Daniel saw through him. He said the airport messages were meant to punish me for choosing a decent man over a dishonest family. I believed that part. I did not reply, but I kept the letter with the court records. Not because I want to hold on to anger, but because memory protects us from returning to places that nearly destroyed us. On the first anniversary of Daniel's death, I flew back to Lisbon alone. I visited the chapel where I had said goodbye. Then I rode one of the old yellow trams up the hill and ordered coffee at a tiny restaurant overlooking the river. The coffee was terrible. I laughed so suddenly that the waiter looked worried. Then I cried. For a while, I did both. At sunset, I opened the last note Daniel had written to me. It was not the letter from the suitcase. I had found it weeks later inside his passport holder. It said, "Home is not the place where people are required to let you in. Home is the place where love comes to find you." I once believed my story began with a family refusing to pick me up. It did not. It began when strangers saw me abandoned, opened a door, and helped me carry the truth home. My family thought leaving me at that airport would prove I had no one. Instead, their cruelty made the headlines and showed the whole world that they were the ones who had lost everything. And that is the lesson Daniel left me. Blood may give you relatives, but only courage, kindness, and truth can give you a family.